At his cousin's funeral, Billionaire is stunned as ex-wife reveals twins are in the will. The somber hush of the funeral parlor seemed to wrap the entire world in velvet darkness. Christian Bishop, a billionaire whose very name sparked awe and speculation in the tabloids, arrived with a heavy heart and an even heavier sense of guilt. He was here to say goodbye to his cousin, Henry Bishop, the man who had been his best friend, business partner, and oftentimes his greatest rival. The tension in the air was palpable, like static before a thunderstorm. Little did Christian realize that the quiet reading of Henry's will would explode with a revelation so startling it could upend his entire life: the secret twins. Christian Bishop, at 42, was the quintessential self-made man, or so the magazines wrote. Born into a once modest Bishop family in upstate New York, Christian had displayed a keen mind for business from a young age. At 13, he began selling homemade pastries door to door. By 15, he had launched a small landscaping service that thrived every summer. Those small entrepreneurial sparks lit the flame that would one day become the unstoppable bonfire of Bishop Industries, his holding company that touched everything from real estate to high-tech startups. His cousin, Henry Bishop, had been both a mentor and an accomplice in Christian's ascension. Henry was older by 6 years, charismatic where Christian was calculating, spontaneous where Christian was methodical. There had been no siblings on either side, so the two cousins had grown as close as brothers. They dreamed of conquering the world together, though sometimes they dreamed of conquering it separately. As teenagers, they tested their synergy in local competitions, academic clubs, and summer internships. Henry had the flair to pitch. Christian had the knack to negotiate. Their synergy sparkled at Harvard University, where Henry had studied law while Christian dove into business and finance. But it wasn't without friction. Christian remembered nights at the library, both of them desperately prepping for final exams, while Henry would slip away to pursue social events. It was Henry who had introduced Christian to the glitz of an exclusive Manhattan after-party for top Ivy League graduates, where they had forged connections with future CEOs, senators, and even known philanthropists. Those early nights shaped their worldview. The elite set their rules, and success would demand both cunning and alliances. When they graduated, Henry and Christian decided to merge their talents. Using seed money borrowed from Henry's father, who was Christian's uncle, Adam Bishop, they purchased a struggling real estate property in Brooklyn. Henry handled the legal complexities, Christian undertook the financial intricacies, and they turned the floundering property into a profitable gold mine. Over the following decade, they conquered more frontiers, dabbling in media, transportation, and eventually technology. The unstoppable duo earned notice from the biggest names on Wall Street. Even Morgan Stanley approached them for partnership in an ambitious new investment fund. However, success rarely comes without some measure of discord. Over the years, Christian's hunger for absolute control grated on Henry, who believed in sharing more of the spoils and giving back to the community. Meanwhile, Christian became fixated on top-tier expansions and forging alliances with powerful moguls. He adored quoting Warren Buffett and admired the philanthropic moves of Bill Gates, but at heart, Christian believed in forging his own empire, not necessarily in humbling himself or giving away large chunks of money. During this ascent, Christian married a brilliant concert pianist named Evelyn Ward. She seemed to soften his edges in social gatherings with her thoughtful conversation and sweet humor. Evelyn had grown up in a small town in Pennsylvania, discovered her musical genius early, and by 21, she was touring Europe with an acclaimed orchestra. Christian met her at a charity gala that he had half-heartedly attended, and within months, they were engaged. From the outside, it seemed like a fairy tale romance, two bright stars ascending the highest echelons of success. Yet as Christian's empire expanded, the cracks in his marriage widened. He poured himself into building the business, neglecting personal life for the sake of closing deals. He saw time spent with Evelyn as a distraction from essential negotiations. After all, fortune never slept. For her part, Evelyn felt increasingly isolated, a performer used to applause yet starved for genuine connection. Their friction led to arguments, small ones at first, but soon they escalated, culminating in Evelyn filing for divorce a few years later. Christian, blindsided by her decision, became a recluse for months, throwing himself deeper into work to mask the pain. Henry, through it all, tried to mediate, but the cracks in Christian's personal life also affected their professional synergy. Eventually, the two cousins drifted into separate corners of the business. Henry explored philanthropic ventures, building charitable wings in rural communities. Christian soared forward with expansions into overseas real estate, glamorous hotels, private tech companies, and more. The last time Christian had seen Henry in person had been nearly a year ago at a private fundraiser in Los Angeles. They'd barely exchanged more than a few words. Now, standing in the dim hush of the funeral parlor, Christian felt regrets gnawing at him with every heartbeat. He remembered the promise he'd once made to Henry: no matter what happened, they would remain family. Henry's sudden passing in a car accident left him reeling, grappling not just with grief, but with guilt over lost time and words left unspoken. Christian stepped forward to the casket. Henry's face looked calm, almost as though he was in peaceful slumber. Christian swallowed hard, ignoring the stares and whispers from those in the crowd who recognized him. The hush pressed in, a reminder that once this funeral ended, the unstoppable duo would never be whole again. Little did he know, Henry's final will contained a shocking clause that would not only entangle Christian's future, but also dredge up the ex-wife he believed was gone from his life forever, and, most astonishingly, the news of twin children he'd never known existed. The parlor's velvety curtains muffled the crying and hushed conversations. Dozens of attendees, family, friends, business associates, philanthropic partners milled about, offering condolences and trading sorrowful stories. In a corner, Henry's longtime personal assistant, Roxanne Porter, stood with red-rimmed eyes. She had arranged every detail of the funeral and had also served as a buffer to ward off intrusive reporters. Christian glanced around, trying to identify the faces. Many were well-known philanthropic leaders, investors from Silicon Valley. A famous film director, Henry, had funded for a documentary about global warming. Christian forced polite nods, acknowledging each handshake, but he could sense the curiosity burning behind every gaze. Why was Christian Bishop, reclusive and high-powered, finally making an appearance? He found a seat at the front, grateful to sink into a pew. On the seat beside him lay the memorial brochure. He picked it up, letting his eyes linger on Henry's photograph. In it, Henry wore that trademark grin, mischievous, confident, and warm all at once. It reminded Christian of 1,000 shared memories, from pranks they pulled at summer camp to heated arguments in boardrooms over whether to invest in a risky startup. His mind drifted back to the last month. He had been in Tokyo, negotiating a potential acquisition of a robotics firm, when he'd received the call from Roxanne. "Henry's gone," she said through sobs. Christian had felt as if the floor under him crumbled. He hadn't believed it, had even demanded confirmation, all while an entire boardroom of Japanese investors stared at him in confusion. It took him a full hour to accept the truth. A sudden whisper behind him drew Christian back to the present. "That's him, right? Christian Bishop, the cousin?" The voice was unfamiliar, hushed, laced with curiosity. I heard Henry tried to reconcile with him recently, but Christian never responded. Guilt stabbed at Christian again. He regretted not replying to Henry's messages more often, or turning down those dinner invitations. He regretted brushing aside family concerns with the single-minded excuse that business came first. The funeral service began. A pastor stepped forward, offering words of comfort and eulogizing Henry's generous spirit. Several close friends shared anecdotes. Roxanne offered a tear-choked tribute, describing Henry's passion for making a tangible difference, from rural health clinics in Africa to homeless shelters in Detroit. Each story painted Henry as a compassionate visionary. Christian felt the weight of sadness grow heavier, but also a tinge of pride for how Henry had lived. After the service, the crowd filed out to pay final respects. Christian lingered at the casket until Roxanne gently touched his arm and guided him away. As they stepped outside into the brisk afternoon air, he felt the prickle of paparazzi cameras snapping from a distance, capturing every flicker of his expression. Roxanne pulled him aside. "There's something Henry wanted you to have." She extended an envelope with Henry's signature scrawled across the flap. He wrote it a week before. "Well, before everything. He asked me to deliver this at the reading of his will, but I think you should see it beforehand." Christian stared at the envelope. "You've read it?" She shook her head. "No, it's private. That's all I know. The official reading of the will is tomorrow afternoon in Henry's lawyer's office, but I suspect this letter might prepare you for what's to come." Unease tightened Christian's chest. "Thank you," he whispered. Roxanne nodded and turned away, busy with last-minute funeral details. Christian gazed down at the envelope, his heart thumping. He wondered why Henry had left a message specifically for him. Could it be an apology, a plea to continue Henry's philanthropic projects? Or perhaps instructions for the future of the business they once shared? He walked to his limousine, ignoring reporters calling out his name. Once inside the tinted interior, he wasted no time. Carefully, he opened the envelope. His eyes scanned Henry's handwritten words. "Christian, if you're reading this, it means things have not gone as I planned. I don't have time to explain everything. The will might shock you, but trust me, it's for a reason. Please keep an open mind and remember, family is all we have when the world spins out of control. There is one truth that you must learn, and I couldn't tell you before. I hope you'll someday forgive me for keeping secrets." The words trailed off, replaced by Henry's swirling signature. Christian read them twice, searching for clues. Family is all we have. A shocking will, a buried truth. The letter raised more questions than answers. He glanced out the window at the funeral home, where attendants still bustled and mourners embraced in the parking lot. Henry's final words pressed on Christian's mind like a heavy weight. Tomorrow, the lawyer would officially read the will, and from this cryptic hint, Christian suspected his life was about to be thrown off its axis once more. He placed the letter safely into his jacket pocket. The car pulled away from the curb, and Christian stared out at the passing cityscape. The only thing certain now was that Henry Bishop, even in death, could still turn Christian's world upside down. The next afternoon, Christian arrived at the law firm of Griffin and Chambers, a stately building on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Sleek, black marble floors glistened under warm, recessed lighting. Polished mahogany walls framed silent corridors. Henry had always maintained that if one wanted legal expertise wrapped in discreet professionalism, Griffin and Chambers was the place. A receptionist guided Christian to a private conference room. Already seated around a sprawling wooden table were a few key individuals: Roxanne Porter, who offered him a half-smile, and two philanthropic directors associated with Henry's charitable trusts. At the head of the table sat Winston Griffin himself, Henry's longtime personal attorney and one of the founding partners of the firm. Griffin stood, extending a hand. "Mr. Bishop, my condolences." Christian offered a curt nod, eyes scanning for any sign of other family members. The only family he saw was an elderly aunt from the paternal side, a relative who rarely attended gatherings. She looked equally confused about her presence. Griffin cleared his throat and began, "Thank you all for coming. We're here to read and execute the last will and testament of Henry Sebastian Bishop. I'm sure emotions are running high, but I ask for your patience and respect. This is not an easy time." He opened a folder on the table, adjusting his spectacles. "I'll skip some of the formalities and legal jargon, but rest assured, the document has been thoroughly vetted and is legally binding. Henry wrote this final version just over a month ago." Christian leaned forward. A swirl of anxious anticipation coiled in his stomach. Griffin read, "To my dear cousin Christian Bishop, I leave my controlling shares in Bishop Industries under two conditions. The first is that he maintain the philanthropic efforts I have spearheaded. The second is that he acknowledge the presence and legal rights of my descendants and heirs, who are named in a separate sealed envelope. Should Christian refuse either condition, the controlling shares will revert to a designated charity trust." A slight frown formed on Christian's brow. Henry was leaving the controlling shares to him, but only if he agreed to philanthropic efforts and recognized certain heirs. Christian didn't quite grasp the significance yet. Griffin continued, flipping a page. "As for my charitable trust and philanthropic endeavors, half of my personal fortune will be allocated to the Henry Bishop Foundation, with instructions to continue the expansion of educational and medical facilities in underprivileged areas. The philanthropic directors here will oversee those expansions." He paused, took a breath, and then solemnly said, "Now, regarding the sealed envelope containing the identity of the heirs." He looked at Christian. "Henry insisted that this be shared in the presence of all who are named in the will, which brings me to a portion of the reading that concerns a Miss Evelyn Ward." Christian's heart froze at that name. Evelyn Ward, his ex-wife. Why would Henry mention her in his will? Before he could speak, the door to the conference room opened. Evelyn walked in, her posture poised, but her expression strained. Christian's pulse pounded as he took in the sight of her, still beautiful, with chestnut brown hair and the same soulful eyes that had once enthralled him. She didn't look at Christian. Instead, she quietly took a seat next to Griffin. The philanthropic directors exchanged puzzled glances. Christian fought to keep his composure. The swirl of confusion and dread in his chest returned, sharper this time. Griffin continued, "Miss Ward, as per Henry's directive, you are to be present for the unsealing of this envelope. He specifically stated that you have information relevant to it." Evelyn's eyes flickered, and Christian sensed her tension. Griffin opened another envelope, sliding out a single sheet of paper. He read aloud, "I, Henry Sebastian Bishop, declare that in the event of my passing, I wish for the following truth to be revealed to my cousin, Christian Bishop, in the company of Evelyn Ward. There exist two children twins named Lily and Lucas Ward, who hold a rightful place in this will. While they are biologically Christian Bishop's offspring, I promised Evelyn I would protect them and secure their future if Christian ever turned away. I regret having to reveal this in my will, but it is time Christian knows the truth." The moment the words landed, Christian's world lurched. His face went pale, his mind spinning in disbelief. Twins? His twins? Evelyn's children? He stared at Evelyn, searching for confirmation in her eyes. He could scarcely breathe. A stunned silence gripped the room. Finally, Christian managed to speak, his voice hoarse. "Is this some kind of joke?" Evelyn inhaled deeply, tears glistening on her lashes. "I'm sorry, Christian. I never meant to keep them from you forever. It was complicated. We split up before I even discovered I was pregnant. The philanthropic directors exchanged shocked looks. Henry's elderly aunt put a trembling hand to her mouth. Griffin cleared his throat again, clearly taken aback, but determined to maintain professionalism. Henry has specified that Lily and Lucas Ward, whose birth certificates indicate Evelyn Ward as their mother, are also recognized as Christian Bishop's heirs. Mr. Bishop, Henry was unequivocal in stating these children exist, that you are their father, and that they must be included in any inheritance divisions outlined in his final testament. Christian felt as though someone had punched him in the gut. Twins. Nearly 8 years had passed since his divorce from Evelyn. If the children existed, they would be around 7 years old. His mind raced back, the arguments, the strain, Evelyn leaving. He had never suspected she was pregnant. Or had he overlooked the signs in his obsessive focus on business deals and expansions? He locked eyes with Evelyn. Emotions tumbled inside him: rage, betrayal, curiosity, heartbreak, even a flicker of hope. After a loaded pause, Christian's voice came out subdued, almost broken. "Why didn't you tell me?" Evelyn clutched her hands together. "I tried. But every time I reached out, you had your lawyers or your staff handle it. You were so buried in your ambitions. I convinced myself that our children would be better off without the chaos of your world. Then Henry found out, and she paused, glancing at Griffin as if worried about disclosing too much. He stepped in to help financially, ensuring the twins had everything they needed, but insisted, "I give you space until you were ready." Christian couldn't believe it. Henry knew. Henry had kept this monumental secret, and had even financially supported the children. He should be furious. But as he sat there, numbness flooded him, overshadowing anger. He needed time to process the bombshell of fatherhood. "Mr. Bishop," Griffin said, "measured. Henry's will states that if you refuse to acknowledge the twins, the controlling shares and a significant portion of Henry's estate will be placed into a trust for the children to be managed by Miss Ward and the Henry Bishop Foundation until the twins reach adulthood. In other words, he left you a choice. Accept them as yours, continue the philanthropic path, or relinquish your claim on his shares." Christian had spent years wielding power in boardrooms, controlling multi-million-dollar negotiations, rarely flustered by unexpected terms. But never had a single revelation blindsided him like this: a father to twins. And Henry, his friend, brother, partner gone now, leaving behind a final challenge that demanded Christian reevaluate everything he thought he knew. He swallowed hard, trying to find some anchor in the swirling chaos. I need to think," he said at last, forcing the words out through numb lips. Evelyn's eyes shimmered with tears, but she nodded, appearing almost relieved that the secret was finally out. The philanthropic directors murmured to each other. Roxanne dabbed at her cheeks with a tissue, her own expression a mix of empathy and shock. Griffin closed the folder. "Take your time, Mr. Bishop." Henry understood this would come as a shock. "But we do need a formal response for the record within 2 weeks." Christian nodded absently. 2 weeks to decide whether to step into fatherhood and honor Henry's philanthropic legacy, or abandon the shares and everything Henry had built for him. 1,000 thoughts collided in his mind. He found no immediate answers. As the meeting wrapped, Christian rose on unsteady feet. The world felt surreal. He realized that the only person who might have helped him navigate this storm, Henry, was gone. And now, Henry had left the biggest responsibility of all, forcing Christian to reckon with truths buried for too long. He glanced at Evelyn one last time, question after question blazing in his eyes. She gave a small, apologetic nod. Then, without another word, Christian walked out of the conference room. The weight of fatherhood and the ghost of Henry's final wish pressing on his shoulders like a monumental burden he wasn't sure he was ready to bear. By the time Christian left Griffin and Chambers, clouds had gathered above Manhattan. The sky threatened rain, matching his turbulent thoughts. His limousine idled at the curb, but instead of getting in, he signaled the driver to wait and set off down the sidewalk on foot. For hours, Christian walked the city streets, lost in memory. New York bustled around him, taxis honking, pedestrians jostling, neon signs flickering to life in the early evening gloom. He drifted toward a familiar district, though he barely registered his surroundings until he found himself standing before a stately brownstone. It was the same brownstone he had purchased for Evelyn soon after they married, a place meant for them to build a life together, the place she left when their marriage fell apart. For years, Christian avoided this neighborhood, the ache of regret too strong to confront. Now, in the deepening twilight, he stared at the dark windows and worn steps as if they might hold answers. Suddenly, he heard footsteps. He turned to see a figure approaching, Evelyn Ward. She hesitated under the glow of a street lamp, raindrops beginning to speckle her coat. Their eyes locked, a silent exchange of shock. Evelyn swallowed. "I saw you walk this way," she said softly. "I hope to find you." Christian's throat felt tight. "I forgot you kept this place," he replied, gesturing to the brownstone. She nodded. "Henry helped with the taxes. It's more of a memory storage than a home. The twins and I live in Pennsylvania now, near my parents." Silence stretched between them, the patter of rain intensifying. Christian struggled to find words, but the torrent of emotions clogged his mind. For years, he'd believed Evelyn had left him out of impatience or boredom. Had it been something else? Finally, Evelyn spoke, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Christian. The first no this is overwhelming. I've wanted to tell you about Lily and Lucas, but everything was so complicated when we divorced. You were distant, building your empire, and I was going through my own turmoil. Why didn't you try again later?" Christian asked, his tone sharper than intended. "Surely after the first year or two you could have found a way," I would have responded, "if it was about something so crucial." Evelyn's eyes flashed with hurt. "I did, but by then your lawyers were unstoppable. I received legal notices that threatened countersuits if I tried to demand more alimony or visitation for hypothetical children. It was messy. I couldn't afford a drawn-out legal battle against you. I wasn't sure how you'd react. I felt I should protect our children rather than drag them into an acrimonious fight." Christian realized with a pang that he'd likely delegated all communication with Evelyn to his attorneys, telling them to handle whatever she wants, without caring to read the details. She would have been a single mother, overshadowed by his powerful legal team. He let out a ragged breath, guilt coiling in his chest. "And Henry?" Christian asked. "He discovered the truth by accident," Evelyn answered. "He saw me with the twins in a park near Gramercy one day. They looked so much like you. He knew immediately. He reached out in a gentle way, offered to help financially. I guess he felt responsible since you and he were so close. He also thought that one day you'd come around and it would be better if you found out on your own terms. But then..." Her voice trailed off, the unspoken end of Henry's life hanging between them. Christian's mind played images of a life he never knew. Birthdays, school plays, Christmas mornings, all without him. He pictured Lily and Lucas, his twins, smiling, growing, living entire years without their father. The weight of it threatened to crush him. Evelyn took a step closer, her eyes pleading. "It's not that I wanted to keep them from you forever. Henry tried to nudge you gently on multiple occasions, but you were always busy, preoccupied. I'm not blaming you. It was just the circumstances." Raindrops trickled down Christian's cheeks, mingling with tears he refused to acknowledge. I suppose Henry felt this was the only way to make me face reality." She nodded. "He cared about you. He cared about the twins. He wanted to unite everyone in a way that wouldn't end in bitterness." For the first time, Christian allowed himself to imagine the possibility of meeting his children. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. His entire identity as a single, childless magnate was unraveling. Could he even be a father? He cleared his throat. How old are they? They'll turn 8 in a few months. Christian closed his eyes, remembering exactly what he was doing 8 years ago, finalizing a massive merger that catapulted Bishop Industries into the global arena. When Lily and Lucas were born, he'd been in back-to-back meetings and celebrations, oblivious to the biggest milestone of his personal life. "I want to meet them," he said quietly, though his heart tremored at the thought. If you'll allow it." A soft, hopeful smile touched Evelyn's lips. "They know about you. Henry showed them pictures. I never lied that they had a father out there somewhere. I just told them the timing wasn't right." Christian pressed his hand to his forehead, trying to steady the swirl of emotions. He wanted to demand to see them right now, but a flicker of caution held him back. He needed to prepare himself, figure out how to handle the shock of fatherhood while also dealing with Henry's philanthropic conditions. The rain fell in heavier sheets now, drenching them both. Evelyn gestured to the brownstone. "We can go in, if you want, just for a few minutes, to get out of the rain." Wordlessly, Christian followed her up the steps and inside. The interior was dim, musty from disuse, yet familiar. Old furniture, a threadbare rug, shadows of a life they once planned but never truly lived. Evelyn flicked on a single lamp, casting a warm glow over the foyer. Christian's gaze landed on a dusty piano in the corner. He remembered nights when Evelyn's playing had filled their home with enchanting melodies. Now it stood silent under a dusty sheet. "They're amazing kids," Evelyn said softly. "Smart, curious, but they've had questions about their dad for a while. I always knew I'd have to answer someday." Christian swallowed, forcing composure. "I don't know how to do this. I've spent my life orchestrating mergers, acquisitions, expansions, everything I could control with logic and strategy. But fatherhood, Henry's philanthropic conditions, it feels like I'm wading through unknown territory." Evelyn touched his arm gently. "You don't have to figure it out alone. The twins already have a good life. They're not expecting a miracle. They just want to know you." In that moment, Christian felt a flicker of gratitude that Evelyn had raised them well, gratitude that Henry had watched over them, and perhaps gratitude that fate was giving him a second chance at a family he'd lost. He glanced around the brownstone. "I'll contact you soon," he said. "I need to finish up Henry's estate matters, and then I want to meet them properly. Maybe at your parents' house in Pennsylvania, or somewhere comfortable for them." A tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek, but she nodded. "Yes, of course. Take as much time as you need, but I hope you won't wait too long." Christian's mind roiled with so many questions about the twins, about Henry's philanthropic demands, and about the controlling shares now hinging on his decision. But he knew one thing: ignoring the truth was no longer an option. He held Evelyn's gaze for a moment, then turned to leave. At the door, he paused, casting a final glance at the dusty piano. Once upon a time, that instrument's song had filled their home with hope. Perhaps, somewhere beyond the sorrow, that melody could return. Stepping back into the rainy night, Christian felt the first threads of resolution weaving through his heart. The ghosts of the past were fading, replaced by the urgent demands of a future where he was not just a billionaire, but a father as well. Over the next week, Christian delved into damage control. Although Henry's will had yet to go fully public, rumors spread swiftly through corporate circles. Board members of Bishop Industries began to hear whispers that Henry's controlling shares were contingent on Christian's acceptance of an unexpected clause. Uncertainty rippled through the markets, stock prices wavered, but Christian discovered he had larger concerns than a dip in share prices. Night after night, he wrestled with the realization that he was a father. He pored over documents from Evelyn's attorney's birth certificates, confirming Lily and Lucas Ward, medical histories, glimpses of their school reports. They were bright, healthy, inquisitive children who loved music like their mother and building contraptions out of Legos, perhaps an echo of Christian's own childhood tinkering. Board members pressed him for answers, journalists hounded him for statements, but Christian knew what really mattered. At last, with hands trembling, he dialed Evelyn's number. "I want to meet them," he said simply. And so, on a crisp Sunday morning, Christian found himself driving to a suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania. He wanted to do this alone, no chauffeurs, no staff, no paparazzi. Just a father trying to connect with his children for the first time. Evelyn's parents' home was a tidy, two-story house with a neatly trimmed lawn and a swing set in the backyard. As he parked on the street, Christian realized his heart was pounding harder than it ever had during billion-dollar negotiations. Evelyn greeted him at the door, her expression a mixture of nerves and encouragement. He followed her into a cozy living room decorated with family photos and bright paintings. On a large sofa sat Lily and Lucas, their eyes wide with curiosity. Christian inhaled sharply. The resemblance was undeniable. Both had the same dark hair and sharp brown eyes that stared at him with an uncanny familiarity. Lily wore a pink headband and clutched a stuffed unicorn. Lucas fiddled with a small robotic toy, occasionally glancing up. Time seemed to freeze. Christian's throat tightened, and he had to remind himself to breathe. Evelyn's mother, a warm-faced woman named Helen, hovered in the kitchen doorway, giving them space. At length, Evelyn broke the silence. "Kids, this is Christian, you know, the one I've told you about." Lucas spoke first, his voice small but steady. "Are you really our dad?" Christian's eyes prickled with tears he fought to control. "Yes," he said softly, I'm your father." Lily studied him with quiet intensity. "You look like me," she observed, "except bigger and older." Christian let out a shaky laugh. "You're right, I'm definitely older." He stepped closer, unsure of what to do with his hands, eventually settling on placing them gently on the back of the sofa. "I'm sorry for not being here sooner." Neither child spoke, but their eyes spoke volumes. Cautious interest mixed with questions they were too young to fully articulate. Evelyn joined them, urging the twins to scoot over and make room. Christian sat, feeling the sofa dip beneath him, an odd sense of surrealness washing over the moment. For the next hour, they talked in halting starts. Christian asked about their favorite subjects in school, their hobbies, their dreams. Lily proudly declared she wanted to be a veterinarian, detailing her love for cats and horses. Lucas said he wanted to invent robots that help people do chores. Christian listened, enthralled by every word, feeling an ache for all the lost time. When Helen brought out freshly baked cookies, the children relaxed further, nibbling while they questioned Christian about his life. Did he live in a big house? Did he have a dog? What was his job exactly? Christian tried to explain in simple terms, conscious that the complexities of finance and corporate dealings might sail over their heads. Yet, in the midst of these ordinary conversations, Christian felt a seismic shift in his understanding of himself. He was no longer alone in the world. These children, one with a unicorn stuffed toy, the other with a half-built robot, were his flesh and blood. He was responsible for them in ways that far outweighed any board decision or business empire. The day drifted by in a blur of cautious smiles and sweet introductions. Evelyn stepped back, allowing him space to bond with the twins. Helen and her husband, Robert, peered from the sidelines with protective eyes, but also with a semblance of relief that Christian was stepping up. Late in the afternoon, as the golden light of dusk filtered through the windows, Christian prepared to leave. Lily tugged on his sleeve, her eyes shimmering with the vulnerability of a child discovering new love. "Will you come back?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. Lucas added, "Yeah. Are you going to disappear again?" Christian crouched to their level, feeling his heart break a little at the uncertainty in their words. "I promise I won't disappear. I'd like to visit more, a lot more if that's okay with you." The twins exchanged a quick glance, those wide matching brown eyes, and nodded. Lily offered him a small, shy smile, and Lucas gave a tiny nod. "Next time," Christian said, "maybe I can take you both out somewhere fun. A museum, or the aquarium, or we can stay here and build robots." Lucas perked up. "Robots, definitely robots," Lily giggled. "And maybe a pony?" Christian laughed softly. "I can't promise a pony today, but we'll see about riding lessons in the future." He pulled them both into a gentle hug, overwhelmed by the warmth of their small arms around him. For a moment, the world slipped away, and all that mattered was this fleeting unity. As he stood to leave, Evelyn walked him to the door. A question hovered in the hallway, unspoken but urgent. What next? How would they navigate co-parenting, especially under the looming shadow of Henry's will? But at that moment, a soft sense of hope thrummed through Christian. He would figure out the business ramifications, the philanthropic obligations, and every other twist Henry had left behind. Because nothing, no boardroom deal, no corporate drama could overshadow the simple truth. He had children who needed him. He gave Evelyn a final look, gratitude and uncertainty intermingling in his gaze. She nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever the future held, they would have to face it together, for the sake of Lily and Lucas. Driving away from that suburban home, Christian felt lighter and heavier at once, lighter with the hope of new beginnings, heavier with the weight of responsibility. In the sky overhead, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds in hues of orange and pink, a fleeting signal that even as day turned to night, new dawns awaited on the horizon. And for the first time in years, Christian felt truly alive to the possibilities that lay ahead. Back in Manhattan, Christian found that the corporate world did not pause for personal revelations. Upon returning to Bishop Industries headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper on Park Avenue, he was immediately besieged by anxious executives. Stockholders worried about the potential shift in leadership if Christian refused Henry's conditions. The philanthropic branch staff, uncertain of their future, awaited clarity. Christian stepped into the top-floor executive conference room where a monthly board meeting had convened. Tension hummed in the air. As he took his seat at the head of the table, the flurry of concerned chatter died down. Richard Lockett, the CFO, cleared his throat. "Christian, we've been hearing rumors about Henry's will. Something about new heirs and philanthropic stipulations." All eyes turned to Christian. He inhaled slowly, recalling Henry's final wish. He realized that telling half-truths would only foment more uncertainty. "Yes, there are some new conditions. Henry's controlling shares are offered to me on the basis that I uphold his philanthropic endeavors. There are also personal aspects I won't delve into. Let me just say, Henry left instructions that I intend to honor, uneasy shifting in chairs. And if you don't?" asked Muriel Tan, a board member famous for her bluntness. "Then the shares revert to a charity trust," Christian stated calmly, "which would place a significant portion of our company's direction outside our control. You can imagine the ramifications." A low murmur. The board understood well. If the shares fell into a trust, philanthropic directors could effectively block or redirect major corporate decisions. That was Henry's final gambit, ensuring that Christian either worked in tandem with Henry's philanthropic vision or let go of the empire. "I'm fully prepared to accept Henry's conditions," Christian said, voice firm. "I will continue his philanthropic projects and possibly expand them. We might have to restructure certain budgets. and I'll need your cooperation to align with his philanthropic blueprint. More murmurs rippled around the table. Some members looked uncertain, worried about profit margins and investor appetites. Others looked relieved that Christian would maintain continuity. "Let's discuss the philanthropic expansions," Christian began, gesturing to a set of documents he'd prepared. Henry wanted to focus on educational initiatives and healthcare in underprivileged regions. "I believe we can integrate that into our mission without sacrificing profitability. Corporate social responsibility is becoming more critical than ever, especially in the eyes of international investors. This can be a win-win." A wave of measured approval rose among them. Christian noticed small nods. He realized Henry had laid a foundation that might actually bolster Bishop Industries' reputation if managed correctly. Perhaps the philanthropic push could become a strategic advantage instead of a burden. After the meeting, Richard lingered behind to talk privately. "Christian, I'm just curious," he said, tone cautious, "about this personal aspect. What exactly does Henry's will say about it? Is there anything we should anticipate from a shareholder perspective?" "You know how rumor mills churn." Christian frowned, deciding how much to reveal. Finally, he said, "Henry named heirs in his will, my children." Richard's eyes widened. He seemed too stunned to speak for a moment. "You have kids? I had no idea. It's a recent development to me as well," Christian admitted. "I'm still adjusting. But rest assured, I'm not planning to make drastic changes to the corporate structure in the short term. My children are minors, after all." Richard's curiosity softened. "I see. Well, for what it's worth, congratulations. And if you need someone to handle the press or to set up discreet trust accounts, let me know." Christian nodded in gratitude. "Thank you. I appreciate it." The CFO left, and Christian sat alone in the grand conference room, gazing out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the bustling city below. His phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "The twins keep asking when they can see you again. Lucas wants to show you his new robot design." A soft smile curved on Christian's lips. Even in the midst of corporate chaos, that message grounded him. He typed back a quick reassurance that he'd visit next weekend. Later that evening, Christian found himself in Henry's old office, one that had remained vacant since Henry took on more philanthropic roles. The space was filled with reminders, philanthropic awards on the shelves, framed photos of Henry shaking hands with various community leaders. A large pinned map displayed markers for every project Henry had championed worldwide. Christian walked around, touching the desk, scanning a row of philanthropic proposals Henry had been reviewing before his death. It struck him how little he had known about Henry's philanthropic drive. He had always assumed Henry was content, dabbling in charity for show, but these documents revealed deep commitments, innovative education programs, sustainable farming initiatives, all meticulously researched. A flicker of respect swelled inside Christian. Henry's philanthropic side wasn't just a vanity project, it was a genuine passion. Christian felt a pang of regret that he had been too consumed with profit to truly appreciate Henry's vision. Remembering Henry's letter, Christian pulled it from his jacket pocket and read it again. "Family is all we have when the world spins out of control. I hope you'll someday forgive me for keeping secrets." A lump rose in Christian's throat. Perhaps Henry's final act was a form of redemption for Henry's own secrets. Yes, but also for Christian's lost priorities. By orchestrating this scenario, Henry forced Christian to meet his children, to open his heart beyond the narrow confines of business success, and to champion philanthropic causes that gave life deeper meaning. Looking at Henry's pinned map one last time, Christian felt the stirrings of a new determination. He'd decided he would not only fulfill Henry's conditions, but surpass them. He would set up new foundations under the Bishop name, integrating more philanthropic projects into the corporate structure. He would spend more time with Lily and Lucas, forging a bond he'd thought he'd lost forever. Closing Henry's office door behind him, Christian realized a new chapter of his life had truly begun, one where fatherhood and empathy would play as big a role as board meetings and corporate acquisitions. As Christian took steps to honor Henry's philanthropic vision and integrate fatherhood into his life, he found an unexpected tension brewing among people he thought he could trust. His longtime legal advisor, Matthew Burns, began questioning the feasibility of the philanthropic expansions, citing concerns about shareholder backlash. At first, Christian dismissed it as simple caution, but soon rumors trickled back to Christian that Matthew was quietly meeting with certain board members, sowing doubt about Christian's leadership. One rumor claimed Matthew was advocating for a new CEO if Christian overcommitted resources to philanthropic causes. Another rumor suggested that if Christian stepped down, the entire will might be renegotiated in court, opening the door for a more investor-friendly approach. Sensing the threat, Christian arranged a private meeting with Matthew in his office, a space lined with austere leather furniture and modern art. The city skyline glimmered through panoramic windows. When Matthew walked in, Christian wasted no time. "I've been hearing unsettling things," he began, keeping his tone level. "Care to explain why you've been holding private talks with board members?" Matthew, an older man with graying temples, responded with a guarded look. "I'm simply doing my job, Christian, providing legal counsel for the best interests of Bishop Industries." Christian narrowed his eyes. "And that includes undermining my acceptance of Henry's philanthropic terms?" Matthew exhaled, tapping his manicured fingertips on the arm of the chair. "Look, Henry's philanthropic aspirations were admirable, but they're not necessarily aligned with maximizing shareholder value. We both know that. Some of our major stakeholders, particularly foreign investors, are worried this philanthropic push might erode profits. They've come to me for reassurance." Christian's voice grew firmer. "I'm aware of the concerns, but I won't let short-term profit overshadow the positive long-term impact Henry wanted. And let me remind you, my acceptance of Henry's terms keeps the controlling shares within the family. If I reject them, we lose control potentially forever." A slight sneer twisted Matthew's lips. "Some believe that even if you reject them, the board could fight the will, or at least negotiate a different arrangement. There's precedent for contesting wills, especially with clauses that drastically affect corporate governance." Anger flared in Christian's chest. He realized Matthew wasn't just cautioning him, he was practically encouraging a legal battle. "So that's your plan? Prolonged litigation. Risk a public scandal about Henry's will, which could damage the company's reputation." Matthew shrugged. "Better a scandal than forcing the company into charitable sinkholes. The market punishes altruism if it undercuts returns." Christian stared at him, hardly recognizing the man he'd worked with for years. Sure, he knew Matthew was pragmatic, but this was outright mercenary. "I'm not going to tear apart Henry's legacy for profit," Christian said, his voice resolute. "If you can't respect that, I'll find legal counsel who can." Matthew's brow furrowed. "I've served this family's legal interests for 15 years. You're making a mistake by ignoring fundamental business realities." Christian squared his shoulders. "Thank you for your service, but as of now, you're relieved of your duties. Send me your final invoice. I'll be retaining new representation." A stunned silence fell. Matthew opened his mouth as if to protest, but Christian's glare brooked no argument. With a final scowl, Matthew exited, leaving behind the faint echo of the door clicking shut. Exhaling, Christian sank into his chair, feeling the weight of confrontation. He knew this move might rattle more people within the company, but he refused to be manipulated into betraying Henry's final wish. That evening, Christian found himself at the brownstone once again, summoned by a text from Evelyn. She was in town for a piano performance and needed to talk. When he arrived, he found her pacing in the dimly lit living room, the old piano uncovered, revealing its ebony sheen. "Is everything all right?" Christian asked, concerned. She spun around, anxiety etched in her features. "I've received letters from people claiming to be acting on behalf of the board at Bishop Industries. They're offering me a settlement if I retract the twins' claim to the shares." Christian's blood ran cold. Settlement? Who? Evelyn pressed her lips together, handing him a crisp envelope. Inside was a typed proposal, anonymous except for an official seal from a law office Christian recognized. It offered Evelyn a sizable sum, conditional upon her publicly stating that the twins were not Christian's children. How did they think they could get away with this? Christian muttered, scanning the document. The birth certificates alone. "They probably hoped to manipulate me into silence," Evelyn said, her voice trembling with anger. "I refuse to let them rewrite the twins' paternity. I need to know what's going on, Christian. Are you in danger of losing control of the company?" Christian set the document aside. "Some members of the board are panicking about Henry's philanthropic terms. They're trying underhanded tactics to keep the status quo, but I won't stand for it." Evelyn's eyes glistened with worry. "Then you have my support. Whatever they try, I'll fight back. I'm not letting them turn this into a circus that hurts our children." Emotion welled in Christian's chest. "Thank you," he murmured. "I appreciate that." She nodded, and for a moment the tension between them thawed into an understanding bond. They were no longer just ex-spouses, but co-defenders of their children's rights and Henry's legacy. "I'm sorry they dragged you into this," Christian said, voice heavy. "I fired Matthew Burns today for something similar." Evelyn exhaled, relief flickering on her face. "At least, I know we're on the same page. We'll stand together on this." In a moment of spontaneity, Christian asked, "Will you play something for me?" He nodded at the piano, remembering the nights when her music had soothed his restless mind. She paused, considering. Then, with a small smile, Evelyn sat on the piano bench, brushing her fingertips over the keys. A soft, melancholic melody drifted into the room, one of her own compositions, if Christian recalled correctly. It carried notes of longing, regret, and fragile hope all at once. Christian closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him, thinking of Henry, the twins, the future. The house no longer felt suffocating with old memories. Instead, it held the promise of something new, a fragile but real reconciliation, a path forward that honored the past without being chained by it. When the final note faded, Evelyn turned, their gazes locked in the soft lamplight. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. Christian nodded, a lump in his throat. "Yes, we will." They didn't speak of love or rekindling anything romantic. That was far too big a leap. But in that silent exchange, they acknowledged a partnership forged in necessity and concern for their children's future. Outside, the city hummed with nighttime energy, oblivious to the quiet resolution taking shape in that old brownstone. As Christian departed, the starlit sky overhead felt a shade brighter. He would face whatever corporate storm awaited, because now he understood that family, be it Henry's memory, Evelyn's steadfastness, or his children's well-being, was a priority that transcended profit margins. And, ironically, Henry's final challenge might become the key to a more meaningful life than Christian ever imagined. The 2-week deadline Henry's lawyer had given drew near. In that brief time, Christian immersed himself in honoring Henry's wishes. He hired Catherine Liu, an ethical and sharp-witted attorney, to defend the will's terms and integrate Henry's philanthropic plans into Bishop Industries. Away from the boardroom, Christian spent weekends getting to know Lily and Lucas. He listened eagerly to Lucas's robot ideas and applauded Lily's dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Baking cookies and helping with homework left him more fulfilled than any corporate triumph ever had. Yet a faction within the board, led by Gilbert Reinhardt, remained hostile to the philanthropic changes. They demanded a vote of confidence, hoping to derail Christian. At the decisive meeting, Winston Griffin formally asked Christian if he accepted Henry's final conditions, acknowledging the twins and promising to carry on Henry's charity work. Christian rose and, without hesitation, accepted all terms. Reinhardt then invoked a no-confidence vote, claiming the company shouldn't shift resources away from profit. Catherine Liu calmly reminded everyone that, according to Henry's will, Christian's acceptance secured the controlling shares. While the board could vote, only a majority revolt among smaller shareholders could remove him outright, and that seemed unlikely. Tension crackled as the board members cast their votes. Though some sided with Reinhardt, most expressed trust in Christian's leadership. Bolstered by this result, Winston certified Christian's compliance with the will. The controlling shares passed to him, and Henry's philanthropic directives became part of Bishop Industries' future. Later, alone in his office, Christian gazed at a photo of Henry taken before their fallout. In that moment, he sensed Henry's guiding presence and assurance that, even from beyond the grave, Henry was steering him toward a richer, more meaningful life. His phone buzzed, a message from Evelyn about Lucas's upcoming science fair. Christian smiled and replied he'd be there, no matter what. He realized then that Henry's greatest bequest wasn't the shares or the empire, it was the chance to be a father, to realign his priorities, and to leave a legacy of compassion rather than mere wealth. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster of secrets, twists, and heartfelt revelations in At His Cousin's Funeral. Billionaire is stunned as ex-wife reveals twins are in the will. We've traveled from boardrooms to a quiet Pennsylvania home, witnessed shocking confessions, corporate betrayals, and the redemptive power of family. As Christian Bishop took on the mantle of fatherhood, he discovered a deeper purpose beyond the zeros in his bank account. In doing so, he fulfilled the dying wish of his beloved cousin, Henry Bishop, reminding us all that true wealth is measured by the love and legacy we leave behind. If you found yourself swept up in this emotional tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every thumbs up and comment helps our community grow, allowing us to bring you more captivating stories filled with drama, intrigue, and human connection. Until next time, thank you for watching.